Hey folks, welcome back to Prepping with Sarge. So I try really hard not to be one of those fear porn, doom and gloom channels, but occasionally we do have huge real world threats that we do need to talk about, this being a prepping channel. So today we're going to be talking about what would World War III potentially look like and what you could be doing right now to prepare yourself for the possibility of that situation. Now, first things first, this being one of those big topics, I want to encourage people, before you get any further into this, not to go into panic mode. Please do not go out and take your credit card and spend it on thousands and thousands of dollars worth of gear. You actually create your own little personal SHTF situation when you do that, and there is a chance that things could de-escalate, right? So just be sensible, have a budget for your preps, stick to your budget, and in the long run, you're going to be in much better shape than 99% of the people out there who don't pay attention to this stuff. So what are we talking about right now? So why are things escalating in the world? Well, if you've been paying attention to the news, and I do encourage people to pay attention to the news, but as you know on this channel, we always tell people, go to multiple sources, go to sources outside of the United States, and fact check and use your thinky think, as my friend Steve from Corsair Trainers says, use your thinky think to critically think, make your own decisions about what's best for your family. But recently, Israel had made a strike that had affected some of Iran's leadership, and then Iran did a counterstrike where they sent several hundred drones and missiles towards Israel. Now, fortunately, through the combined efforts of the United States, Israel, and Jordan, and a couple other supporters, most of this stuff was knocked out of the air before it even reached its target. There was one injury, but this certainly escalates things. This was the biggest attack from Iran on Israel in a very long time. And when I tried to post some stuff about this on some of the forums, the response really surprised me, because people were like, oh, just more fear mongering, and this is just like the eclipse. No, folks, this is not just like the eclipse. This is a real world scenario. And if you don't believe old Sarge, because I'm just a stupid YouTuber, I get that, then talk to some of your friends. We all have friends who work in the military. We all have friends who work in government positions, right? I'm not the only person who has sources. Everybody has sources. Talk to the people that you trust. You don't have to trust old Sarge. I'm just a YouTuber putting out videos for your entertainment, right? Right. You know what I'm saying? All right. So that definitely kicks things off. And we have been in a state of increased tension now for a while, right? So what are some of the scenarios that could kick this off into a much bigger World War type event, right? This definitely moves some more pieces on the chessboard, right? But we've also got Russia-Ukraine conflict, right? So now, does that stay contained to, let's talk about that first. Does that stay to Russia and Ukraine? Don't know, right? So Vladimir Putin says that he has no interest in attacking Poland and Lithuania, but a lot of the intel says that that's something that they're worried about, that if Ukraine falls, that the next targets will be Poland and Lithuania. Well, Poland and Lithuania are NATO allies. They're members of NATO. And if they're attacked, they will almost certainly invoke Article 5, which means that all other members of NATO have to get involved to help protect them, which means now the U.S. is full-on involved. Not just a proxy, not just sending aid, not financial aid and intelligence and things like that, but full-on involved. That if that happens, and I'm not saying it's going to, but if that happens, then yeah, we've got all of the NATO nations, most of Europe, and whatnot, all involved. And now you pretty much are at a world war at that point. There's other players here though too, right? So we've got China and Taiwan. China wants Taiwan under its wing, right? And there is constantly, pay attention to your news, folks. Watch the international news. Don't just watch that crap that's on the two main channels that's always about Trump and his trials. There's a lot more going on in the world that they're not talking about. China wants to take Taiwan under its wing. And if that happens, and they run these military exercises where they'll fly right up to them and like simulate an attack and then pull off. And this stuff goes on all the time, right? You know, they actually show some of this stuff in the movie, the fictional movie Top Gun, if you watch that. But if that happens, and again, that's if that happens, then Japan will get involved. Australia has already said that they will get involved because of the destabilization of that area of the Pacific. And the United States absolutely will get involved to aid in Taiwan, to aid with Taiwan's defense, right? That's a world war scenario. We've got multiple nations, and it's going to affect the entire world economy. So that's another possible scenario. Now, so we've named 3 big players on the board. We've got Russia, we've got China, we've got Iran. Okay, there's a 4th one, North Korea, right? So North Korea at some point could attack South Korea again, right? And South Korea is a big ally to the United States. Now, South Korea has great capabilities. I have no doubt that they could defend themselves, but how big does that tension escalate to? And U.S. would get involved because they're an ally to us. We have bases there. We would absolutely be involved in a situation where North Korea attacks South Korea, right? So again, now, does North Korea take that a step further and say, okay, U.S., you want to get involved, then they attack some U.S. interests? Then we invoke Article 5 and all the NATO nation states get involved. So this is why it's big. This is why all these tensions that are going on are big, and you need to be paying attention to it. Now, as always, on this channel, we pray for peace, right? We pray for peace. We pray for peaceful solutions. We pray for de-escalation of tension. There's a lot, you know, there's no scenario out of this that doesn't hurt the United States, right? And as much as there's this like thing that goes on, this financial tension that goes on with the United States and China, China is a huge trade partner for the United States. We can't hurt them without also hurting ourselves. You understand that, right? Like, we're so dependent on the products, the medicines that they provide for the United States. Most of that stuff's produced outside the United States. And you may say, well, buy American. Yeah, okay, that's great. It's not that simple, folks. We don't have, because, you know, we had people downsized everything and we outsourced everything. We put our factories outside the United States. We can't just get this production going tomorrow. Like, this takes years of rebuilding infrastructure if we're going to start becoming an independent nation. And say we're not going to be dependent on China, or we're not going to be dependent on these other countries for the things that they produce for us, right? So it's a very intermingled relationship that's very, very complex, and China needs us to buy their goods, and we need China to produce these goods, and we both get seriously damaged if this escalates to war, right? Okay, so everybody understands this, right? Okay. All right, so we're a prepping channel. What can you do to start being prepared for the hopefully unlikely situation where this escalates to, you know, yet another war? Now, those of us who are Gen X and we grew up in the 70s and 80s, we knew a time, and part of the 90s, of course, too, yeah. We knew a time of relative peace. I actually feel really bad for kids who were born after 2001, because you've never known what the United States looked like when we were in times of peace. And the world was a lot better for the United States. You know, yeah, we have more conveniences now. We have the internet and social media and all these cool things. Medicines are better than they were then, but medical technology is better than it was then. But I will go as far as to say that most people were happier in the late 70s, throughout the 80s, and most of the 90s. Right?
Most people were happier.
Right? Even without all of this technology and advances that we have now. I would say most people had a higher quality of life, but we can't go back in time. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to prepare like we always do. We're going to be sensible. We're not going to blow up our budget. You want to have, number one, you want to have a way to purify water. Okay. Not just individual, like I have filters for just my bug out bag. That's the Grail system. And you need something for your family that's going to be able to produce water much more in volume, right? So I know a lot of people have just the Life Straw. Okay, so every time you need water for something, and I'm talking about just the little ones, those are good backup options. Life Straw is a good backup option. But are you really going to go down and huddle into a puddle every time you need water? That's not realistic, folks. So you got to have a way to purify water. And sometimes boiling water is not enough. That's another myth in the prepping and survival community. There's elements in there, heavy metals, chemicals, things like that can't be filtered out just by boiling. So you need a way to purify water. I'll link something down below. You can check that out. You don't have to use my link. Do what makes sense for you. I'm just trying to make it easy for people, right? Then you got to think about food security, right? So, yeah, you need some long-term food options. You need, companies like Nutrient Survival and For Patriots and Augustin Farms, all great options for freeze-dried food. Maybe you learn to do canning yourself. Maybe you learn how to do dehydrating yourself. Great options. But you also need to be learning a skill or several skills like gardening, foraging, hunting, fishing, trapping, right? So, have some other options so it's not just canned goods on your shelf for your food security. Then you got to be thinking about your self-defense. Now, I don't talk about that a whole lot on my channel, but I think you should be thinking about it. You need to have options because if things get really crazy and people are hungry and they don't have medicine and things like that, they're going to get desperate. Nobody is more dangerous than a mama whose baby is starving. Don't think that people won't hurt you for your supplies, so you have to have a way to protect yourself, right? Again, I pray that it never comes to anything like this, but you need to have a way to protect yourself, and you should also train in like some sort of martial arts. Again, do what you can within your budget. Do what you can. If you don't have a big budget for that, then maybe ask a friend to teach you a few things, right? A couple months worth of training is better than nothing at all. You can take a lot of places have a few free classes. It's a start. It's something, right? So learn some self-defense and have ways to protect yourself. Leave it at that. Two other big preps that I think people should be thinking about for this kind of scenario is first aid supplies. And I'll say this and say this and say this. However much first aid supplies you have at home in your kit is not enough. Add more. You need way more first aid supplies than you think you need. And how do I know this? Because a couple of years ago, I had an emergency surgery and I had to do dressing changes for the suture wound area for several weeks. And man, do you start blowing through supplies once you're changing dressings, like way more than I would have expected. I've got a discount code down there for Rhino Rescue. Check out their stuff. If you don't want to use them, that's fine. Use what makes sense for you. Build your own kits, whatever. But you got to be thinking about your first aid supplies, and you need much, much more than you think you possibly need. Trust me on this. Last one is medications, right? So not only do you need to have a good supply of your over-the-counter medicines, things like aspirin, Benadryl, Imodium, and I've talked about before why those three should be in every prepper's pantry kit, but you need other things as well, right? You need like your prescriptions if you have those. And who supplies prescriptions for the prepping community? You can get a whole year worth of a lot of prescriptions from Jace Medical. Guess what? I got a discount code for you. There's a reason why I've chose the certain brands and vendors to work with, because these are the same brands that I use for myself and my family to prep my family, right? So again, if you don't want to use mine, okay, that's fine. I'm just putting the information out there, and my stuff's down the bottom to make it convenient for you. And I try to, when I'm working with these companies, I always ask, can I get a discount code for my audience, okay? But if you don't want to use my links, it's fine. Just start prepping if you haven't. Please, I beg of you, all right? And last piece here is, of course, let's revert back to what we said at the beginning, is don't panic. Some of this stuff might de-escalate. I pray so. Some of this tension might work itself out, right? Maybe the United States doesn't even need to get involved. Maybe this is just like, let Ukraine and Russia fight it out. Let Iran and Israel fight it out, right? And we're going to continue to give material aids and money and supplies and ammunition and things like that. Of course we are. Especially to our allied nations. Of course we are. But maybe we don't have to have boots on the ground, right? And I hope that these conflicts end for everybody involved. I pray for anybody that's having to live in a war zone. I can't imagine what it's like. I'm not a soldier. I've never served in a combat arena, but I'm a therapist who's worked with people who have, and I hear the horror stories. And anyone who thinks like, hey, the United States needs a civil war to clear up some of its problems, you have no flipping clue what you're talking about and what that would mean, and the people that you're going to lose, and how it would ruin your mental health, and you're going to lose loved ones. And just read some of the stories from the first American Civil War, right? And hopefully the only American Civil War, of brother versus brother, people killing their own family members because of disagreement on North or South. You understand what I'm saying? All right, I think I've said enough for today, folks. I hope you're staying prepared, but also enjoy your life. Get outside, please. Tell your family that you love them, and do something good for yourself as well, all right? Keep planting your seeds. Keep stacking your silver. This is Prepping with Sarge.